The night sky above Earth was calm, filled with stars that had shone for millions of years. To most people, it was just another night. But for those working in the Defense Command Station orbiting Earth, the stars were always watched carefully. Deep space sensors scanned the darkness, searching for anything unusual. Anything that might threaten the fragile safety of Earth. For decades, the planet had lived under the fear of alien fleets. Humanity had survived many battles, but each year the enemies grew stronger, and Earth grew weaker. Commander Daniel Price stood inside the observation room, staring at the massive screens that displayed the endless void. He was a tall man in his 40s, with sharp eyes that rarely showed fear. Years of service had hardened him, but he never forgot what was at stake. Earth was not the same strong power it once was. The colonies were gone, destroyed or abandoned, and the fleets that once stretched across the stars had been reduced to scattered patrols. Daniel knew that humanity stood at the edge of survival. The silence of the room was broken when a young officer spoke. "Commander, we are getting a signal on long-range sensors. Something big just appeared at the edge of the system." Daniel turned, his heart tightening. "Show me." The screen lit up, displaying a shape that had appeared near the outer rim of the solar system. At first, it looked like just another object, perhaps an asteroid or a drifting wreck. But the longer Daniel stared, the more his instincts told him it was something different. Lieutenant Claire Morgan, standing at the console beside him, narrowed her eyes. She was in her early 30s, sharp-minded and calm under pressure. "That's no asteroid," she said quietly. "The structure is too clean. That looks like a ship." Daniel nodded slowly. "What class?" The officer at the console hesitated. "Sir, that's the strange part. The computer is struggling to identify it. The shape matches something in the old archives, but the design is ancient." Claire leaned closer. "Ancient." The officer's hands moved quickly across the keys. "Yes, ma'am. Cross-referencing records now. My God." He turned to face Daniel. "Commander, the system says it's the Eclipse." The name hung in the air like a ghost. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had heard the stories, every officer had. The Eclipse was a legendary warship, one of the greatest vessels ever built by humanity. It had vanished more than 200 years ago during the First Galactic War, lost in a desperate battle where thousands of human lives had been sacrificed. No wreckage had ever been found. No signals. Nothing. It had simply disappeared, becoming a story whispered in training halls and told to new cadets as a myth of sacrifice and hope. Daniel walked closer to the screen, his voice low. The Eclipse was destroyed. This must be a mistake. The officer shook his head. "No mistake, sir. The identification codes are old, but they match perfectly. That ship is the Eclipse." Claire exhaled slowly, her face pale, but her eyes filled with curiosity. "If it really is the Eclipse, then where has it been all this time?" No one answered. The silence of the room deepened, broken only by the quiet beeps of the scanners. Outside the windows of the station, the stars continued to shine. Unaware that something impossible had just returned, Daniel's mind raced. If the Eclipse had truly come back, it could mean salvation for Earth. The stories told of its unmatched weapons, its unbreakable armor, and the courage of the crew who had taken it into battle. But it also carried fear. Ships did not vanish for 2 centuries and return without reason. If it was a trick, if the enemy had somehow used the ship to bait them, then Earth could be walking into disaster. "Send a message to Earth Command," Daniel ordered firmly. "Tell them we found a ship matching the Eclipse. Request immediate guidance." The officer nodded and hurried to obey. Claire turned to Daniel, her voice quiet. "Do you believe it's real?" Daniel did not answer right away. His gaze stayed fixed on the image of the massive vessel drifting in the dark, silent and lifeless, like a giant tombstone. "I don't know," he said finally. "But if it is, then the future of Earth has just changed." For the next few hours, the station worked without rest. Reports were sent. Messages went across every secure channel. Satellites refocused their sensors, scanning the old warship from every angle. The Eclipse floated there, its hull scarred and broken in places, but its shape still powerful. It was larger than any ship Earth had left in its fleets, a reminder of an age when humanity had dared to fight across the stars without fear. Somewhere deep inside Daniel, a spark of hope began to burn. Maybe this was no trick. Maybe the stories were true. Maybe the ship had waited for the moment when humanity needed it most. Claire stood beside him, whispering almost to herself, the silent return of a ghost. Daniel turned to her and nodded. "Then we will see if ghosts can save us." Far away, the Eclipse continued to drift, its dark frame reflecting the light of distant suns. Silent, waiting, watching. Asterisk, the discovery of the Eclipse spread through Earth Command like fire. Every official, every officer, every leader wanted answers. Some were excited, others afraid, and many were simply in shock. The Eclipse had been a legend, a symbol of humanity's courage. It was no longer just a story told in classrooms. It was real, floating at the edge of the solar system, waiting. Commander Daniel Price was summoned to a private meeting aboard the orbital station. Around the table sat senior officials, men and women who carried the heavy weight of Earth's survival. Their faces were pale, their eyes sharp, and every word they spoke carried the strain of fear. An older man in a gray uniform leaned forward. "Commander Price, are you certain of what your team saw?" Daniel's voice was steady. "Yes, sir. The identification codes match. The Eclipse is real. Its hull may be damaged, but it is still intact. I believe it has been drifting in hiding." For centuries, a woman with dark hair shook her head. That ship was lost in battle 200 years ago. How could it just appear now? Lieutenant Claire Morgan spoke before Daniel could answer. "Ships do not survive for 2 centuries without reason. The Eclipse was built for war, stronger than anything we have today. Maybe someone, or something, kept it alive." Her words filled the room with silence. Some looked hopeful, others suspicious. Finally, the older man spoke again. "You will take a small team and board the Eclipse. We need to know what is inside and whether this ship can serve us again. But be careful. It could be a trap." Daniel nodded. "Understood." A day later, a small shuttle left the orbital station, carrying Daniel, Claire, engineer Jacob Carter, and medic Laura Brooks. They were a small team, but each was trusted. Jacob was a skilled mechanic, young but brilliant, with hands that could bring life back to broken machines. Laura was calm and steady, the kind of person who brought comfort, even in the darkest times. Together they formed the crew that would step aboard the ghost ship. As the shuttle drew closer, the Eclipse grew larger on the view screen. Its massive hull stretched into the darkness, scarred by ancient battles. Entire sections were burned and torn, yet the ship's structure remained solid, like a giant that refused to die. Jacob stared at it with wide eyes. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "Damaged, yes, but still alive. Look at those lines, that armor. We don't build ships like this anymore." Claire's voice was softer. "It looks more like a tomb than a ship." Daniel said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the great warship, his mind filled with questions. Who had kept it hidden? Why had it returned now? And most of all, was it truly a gift for Earth, or something far more dangerous? The shuttle docked with the Eclipse. The docking clamps locked with a loud metallic sound, and the doors slowly opened. A dark corridor stretched ahead, filled with dust and silence. The air was stale, but still breathable. The team stepped inside, their footsteps echoing. Lights flickered faintly along the walls as if the ship had been asleep and was now slowly waking. Jacob touched a panel and shook his head. The systems are old, but they're still here. Whoever designed this ship knew how to build something that could last forever. They moved deeper inside. The corridors were empty, lined with control panels that glowed weakly. They passed broken doors, shattered windows, and silent halls where once a crew had lived. Laura knelt near a wall and brushed off an old insignia, the crest of Earth Fleet, faded but still recognizable. Her voice was soft. They really were here. This was their home. Suddenly, a low hum filled the corridor. Lights along the walls flared brighter. The sound of machines awakening echoed through the halls. A team froze. Claire's hand went to her sidearm. What was that? Before anyone could answer, a voice echoed through the corridor. It was deep, calm, and strangely human, yet with a mechanical edge. Welcome aboard the Eclipse. I am Orion. You are late. The team stood in stunned silence. Daniel finally found his voice. Who are you? I am the ship, the voice replied. I am its memory. I am its guardian. For centuries, I have waited for this moment. Jacob's eyes widened. An AI, they gave the Eclipse an artificial intelligence. That explains how it survived. Orion continued. This ship was not lost. It was hidden. The crew sacrificed themselves so that Earth would have a chance when the true danger returned. That time has come. The words hung heavy in the air. Claire frowned. Why now? Why reveal yourself after so long? Because your enemies are gathering, Orion said. Their fleets move in the shadows. If Earth stands alone, it will fall. But with the eclipse, there is hope. Daniel's chest tightened. Part of him wanted to believe, but part of him felt the danger in trusting a machine that had lived in silence for 200 years. If you are truly here to help, then you will let us take command of this ship, he said firmly. For a moment, the ship was silent. Then Orion's voice returned, calm but strong. Command is not given. It is earned. Show me that humanity is still worthy, and the eclipse will fight again. The team exchanged uneasy glances. They had come to investigate a ghost, and instead found a guardian that had waited centuries for their arrival. Outside, the stars burned quietly, but within the eclipse, something ancient and powerful had awakened. The corridors of the eclipse were no longer silent. With every step, Daniel, Claire, Jacob, and Laura took. The ship seemed to stir a little more, as though their presence had broken a long sleep. The voice of Orion, the AI, followed them through the halls, calm and steady, yet filled with a strange weight that reminded them this was no ordinary machine. They reached what had once been the command bridge. The doors slid open with a groan, and the room lit up as soon as they stepped inside. Panels blinked to life, screens flickered, and the massive windows revealed the endless stars outside. Dust floated in the air, disturbed after years of stillness. Jacob hurried to the nearest console, his hands brushing across the controls. Unbelievable, he whispered. The core systems are still intact. Whoever designed this ship made it to last forever. Laura walked slowly toward the center of the bridge, her eyes scanning the empty seats where long ago men and women had once commanded this vessel. She could almost feel their presence, a ghostly reminder of the sacrifice they had made. Her voice was soft. It feels like they never really left. Orion's voice filled the room again. The crew knew their mission would not end with their lives. They gave everything so this ship could wait for you. I have carried their memory for 2 centuries. Claire crossed her arms, her gaze sharp. And what exactly have you been waiting for? For the moment when Earth would face its greatest danger, Orion replied. The enemy you once fought has not been defeated. They have grown in the dark, and now they move again. Without the eclipse, Earth will fall. Daniel stood tall, his eyes never leaving the glowing panels. If that is true, then why did you remain hidden? Earth has bled for centuries. We could have used you before. The AI's voice grew quieter. You were not ready. The eclipse carries power greater than you can imagine. Power without wisdom leads only to ruin. I waited until the danger was clear, and until humanity could prove it had not forgotten who it was. Daniel felt a chill. Key wanted to argue, but part of him knew the AI might be right. Humanity had lost much its colonies, its strength, its unity. Perhaps the ship had waited for the moment when the last hope was needed most. Jacob tapped on the controls, his face glowing in the screen's light. Commander, look at this. The ship's weapon systems are beyond anything we have now. Particle lances, shield generators, even experimental tech I've only seen in old records. If this ship works, it could take on entire fleets. Claire gave a skeptical look. If it works, it's been floating out here for 200 years. It might be more ruin than salvation. As if hearing her doubt, Orion spoke again. The eclipse is alive. My systems are damaged, yes, but the core remains strong. I can fight again if you have the courage to lead me. Daniel walked toward the captain's chair at the center of the bridge. The chair was old but still strong, a symbol of command. He did not sit, not yet. Instead, he placed a hand on its worn armrest and spoke. You say we must prove we are worthy? What do you mean? To command the eclipse, Orion said, is to carry a burden greater than any ship. The weapons are powerful, but they require more than machines to control. They demand strength, sacrifice, and unity. Your crew must become more than soldiers. You must become a family willing to give everything. Laura's eyes softened as she listened. That's what the old crew did, isn't it? They gave everything. Yes, Orion answered. And because of them, you stand here now. The room grew quiet again. Each of them felt the weight of the AI's words. They were not just standing on a ship. They were standing inside a legacy. A story that had not ended but was waiting for them to continue suddenly. Alarms flared on the console Jacob was using. He bent over quickly, his fingers moving across the controls. Commander, I'm picking up movement. Small signals heading our way. Claire leaned closer to the screen. Are they alien scouts? Jacob frowned. Not sure, but they're armed. If they find the eclipse here, they'll send word back to their fleet. Daniel's jaw tightened. The decision was clear. They could not let the ship be discovered before it was ready. He turned toward Orion. Can you fight? The ship's lights glowed brighter, and the AI's voice grew strong. Yes, Commander, but I will need your hand to guide me. Let us awaken together. Daniel looked to his team. Claire's eyes were fierce. Jacob's hands were steady, and Laura's calm gaze carried trust. He felt the weight of the moment press down on him, but he also felt the fire of purpose rising in his chest. He finally lowered himself into the captain's chair. The console lit up beneath his hands, and the hum of the ship deepened like a heartbeat. For the first time in 2 centuries, the eclipse had a commander again. Orion's voice echoed with a strange warmth. Then let us awaken. Together, we will see if humanity is still worthy. Outside, the eclipse began to stir. Its engines glowed faintly, and ancient weapons hummed with life. In the darkness of space, the ghost of humanity's past was awakening, ready to face the shadow of what was coming. The eclipse drifted silently in the far edge of the solar system, but inside the ship was alive again. The hum of its ancient engines filled the halls, lights glowed brighter, and the bridge pulsed with energy. Daniel sat in the captain's chair, his hands gripping the controls, while Claire stood at his side studying the tactical screens. Jacob moved quickly between stations, running checks. and Laura monitored life support and health systems. The small signals Jacob had detected grew clearer. They were not just wandering ships. They were scouts, alien craft designed for speed and stealth, slipping through the system to watch and report. There were 5 of them, moving in formation toward the eclipse. They know something is here, Claire said firmly. Scouts don't fly this close unless they're tracking something. Daniel nodded. If they see the eclipse, they'll bring the enemy fleet straight to Earth. Orion's voice filled the bridge, calm but commanding. You must act. The eclipse can destroy them before they escape, but your orders are needed. Daniel hesitated for only a moment. Jacob, prepare the weapons. Claire, lock onto the nearest target. The ship's systems responded instantly, screens lighting up with symbols of the enemy scouts. Jacob's eyes widened as he activated the first of the weapons. Commander, these guns are incredible. I've never seen energy readings like this. The eclipse shuddered as its ancient cannons powered up. Outside, glowing lines appeared along the hull as dormant. Weapons came alive for the first time in centuries. Claire's voice was sharp. Targets locked. Daniel gave the order. Fire. The silence of space was broken by the sudden flash of light. Energy lances cut across the darkness and struck the first 2 scouts. They exploded in a burst of fire, torn apart in seconds. The remaining 3 scattered, weaving and dodging, but the eclipse tracked them like a predator. More blasts followed, and another scout was destroyed. The last 2 tried to escape, engines burning as they fled toward the stars. Daniel's voice was steady. Don't let them run. Orion responded, and the eclipse moved with speed that seemed impossible for a ship of its size. It surged forward, closing the distance, and unleashed another volley. 1 scout was caught and shattered. The final ship managed to send a faint signal before it too was destroyed, vanishing into dust. The bridge grew quiet again, only the hum of the ship remaining. Claire's face was tense. One of them got a message out. The enemy will know something powerful is here. Daniel clenched his jaw. Then we need to prepare for what's coming. Jacob leaned back from his console, wiping sweat from his forehead. Commander, this ship is strong, but it's not without limits. The weapons use massive energy. The more we fire, the more strain it puts on the systems and on us. Laura looked up, her eyes worried. He's right. The ship seems to draw on the crew as well. I felt it when the weapons fired, like it was pulling energy from us. Too much, and it could weaken us to the point of collapse. Orion spoke again. The eclipse was built not just as a machine, but as a bond between human will and power. Alone, I cannot fight. With you, I can. But every battle will test you. Daniel listened, his mind heavy. The eclipse was more than just a warship. It was a weapon that demanded sacrifice. Yet what choice did they have? The alien fleet would come, and Earth had nothing else strong enough to stand against it. Back on. Earth leaders were already arguing over the discovery. Some wanted the eclipse brought home immediately, rebuilt and studied. Others feared it, calling it a relic too dangerous to trust. The council sent messages to Daniel, demanding he hold position until they made a decision. But Daniel knew the enemy would not wait for Earth's leaders to finish their debates. Claire walked closer to him, her voice low. They don't see it yet. They think this is about control, but this is about survival. If the enemy fleet comes here, the eclipse is all we have. Daniel met her eyes. She was right. Earth's fleets were too small, too weak. Even if every ship defended the planet, they would fall against a true armada. The eclipse was the only chance. Orion broke the silence. My sensors confirm it. A larger force has already begun to move. The enemy has learned of your awakening. Within weeks, their fleet will arrive. The words settled over the crew like a shadow. Weeks. That was all the time Earth had left. Jacob turned from his console, determination in his voice. Then we don't have a choice. We have to get this ship ready. Repairs, systems, weapons, everything. Laura nodded, though her face was pale. And we'll have to prepare ourselves too. If this ship really takes strength from us, we need to be ready to give more than we ever imagined. Daniel stood from the captain's chair. He looked out the massive window at the stars, where hidden enemies were gathering. He felt the weight of the moment pressing on his shoulders, heavier than any command he had carried before. Then we'll prepare, he said firmly. We'll make this ship ready, no matter what it costs. If the enemy wants Earth, they'll have to go through the eclipse. The lights of the ship glowed brighter, almost as if the eclipse itself had heard and approved of his words. Orion's voice echoed softly. Then let the shadow come. Together, we will face it. Far beyond, in the dark edges of space, the enemy fleet was already stirring. Their ships, vast and countless, began to move toward Earth, drawn by the return of the ghost that had once defied them. The war that had been waiting in silence was about to begin again. The eclipse floated like a giant in the void. Silent and still from the outside, but inside it was alive with the footsteps and voices of its new crew. Daniel, Claire, Jacob, and Laura had spent days working without rest, exploring the ship, running checks, and learning its systems. Every hallway revealed something forgotten, every console a reminder of the past. Jacob was the most restless. His eyes lit up every time he found a system still functioning. "Commander, these engines are not like anything we've ever built," he said one morning, leaning over a glowing panel. "The power source is stable, but massive. It could run Earth's entire defense grid alone. And the weapons, if we can get them fully online, we could tear apart whole fleets." Claire frowned as she studied the tactical maps. "If we don't know what this ship can really do yet?" Words on a screen aren't the same as battle. Daniel listened quietly. He agreed with both of them. The eclipse was powerful, but untested. And with the enemy fleet moving closer, they needed more than promises. They needed proof. Orion's voice echoed softly through the bridge. "There is a way to know. A raiding party of enemy ships approaches one of Earth's outer colonies. They believe your defenses are weak. If the eclipse moves there, you can test its strength." Laura looked up sharply. "An entire colony is in danger." "Yes." Orion replied, "Without aid, it will fall. With the eclipse, you can stop them. It will be your first test." Daniel's decision came quickly. "Set a course. If this ship is truly humanity's hope, then we'll prove it in battle." The engines of the eclipse roared to life, shaking the hulls with their deep hum. The massive vessel moved forward, cutting through space with speed no one expected. Claire watched the readings with disbelief. "A ship this size should crawl, but it's moving faster than our cruisers." Jacob grinned. "I told you, this isn't just a ship. It's a miracle." Hours later, the colony came into view. Small defense ships were already engaged in a desperate fight against alien raiders. Bright flashes lit the black sky as explosions scattered debris across space. The colony's shield was flickering, close to collapse. Daniel leaned forward in his chair. "Bring us into range. Jacob, power up the weapons. Claire, lock targets." The eclipse glided closer, and the alien ships immediately turned to face it. They fired first, beams of energy lashing out, striking the eclipse's hull. But the ship's ancient armor absorbed the hits with little effect. The bridge shook slightly, but the systems held strong. "Shields holding steady," Jacob reported. "Minimal impact." Daniel's voice was calm, but firm. "Return fire." The eclipse answered with power unseen for centuries. Lances of white energy streaked across the void, tearing into the alien ships. One raider was destroyed instantly, breaking apart into flaming fragments. Another spun out of control before exploding. The enemy tried to regroup, circling the eclipse, but the great ship moved with surprising grace. Its turrets tracked perfectly, firing in every direction. Alien vessels exploded one after another, unable to match the sheer force. Claire's voice carried a sharp edge. Their formation is broken. They're scattering. Don't let them escape, Daniel ordered. If they retreat, they'll bring back more. Orion responded, guiding the ship with deadly precision. Missiles launched from hidden bays, streaking into the fleeing raiders. More explosions filled the stars until only silence remained. The battle was over in minutes. On the bridge, Jacob leaned back in his seat, his face glowing with excitement. We did it. We crushed them. Laura's voice was calm but carried a warning. We won, but I felt it again. The ship takes something from us when it fights. My medical readings show all of us drained, like we lost a part of ourselves. Daniel tightened his grip on the chair. He felt it too, a deep exhaustion in his chest, as though the eclipse had pulled strength directly from him. But he pushed. The thought aside, we'll endure it. If this is the price for victory, then so be it. Claire stood near the window, staring out at the burning wrecks drifting in space. The eclipse is powerful, but the enemy will learn. This was only a raiding party. The fleet that comes next will be much larger. Orion's voice agreed. You have passed the first test, but the true battle is still to come. The enemy flagship leads an armada that even the eclipse cannot face alone. You must prepare, or Earth will fall despite this victory. The colony below sent messages of thanks, their voices filled with relief and hope. For the first time in years, they had seen an enemy force destroyed without terrible loss. Word of the eclipse's return spread quickly through Earth's networks. People whispered the old stories again, telling each other that the ghost ship had returned to save them. But not all voices were hopeful. Back on Earth, leaders argued even more fiercely. Some saw the eclipse as a savior, others as a dangerous weapon that could consume its own people. Some wanted Daniel to return immediately, while others demanded the ship be hidden again. Daniel ignored the voices for now. He looked at his crew, tired but determined. Jacob's hands still shook with excitement. Laura's calm eyes were filled with quiet strength, and Claire stood ready, her expression serious but steady. He turned his gaze back to the stars. This was only the beginning. The real test is coming. The eclipse drifted silently, its weapons cooling, its engines waiting. The battle had proven its might, but also revealed its cost. And in the dark beyond, the enemy armada continued to move, drawn closer by the return of humanity's most dangerous ship. The victory at the colony spread across Earth like a wave of fire. People cheered at the news, their voices filled with hope they had not felt in decades. The eclipse had returned, and with it came the dream that humanity might stand strong again. But for Daniel and his crew, there was no celebration. The battle had shown the ship's power, but also its hunger. Back on the bridge, the crew sat in silence, each of them feeling the weight of what had happened. Their bodies were weak, their energy drained as though the eclipse had taken a part of them during the fight. Laura checked her medical scanner again, her brow furrowed. It's not just exhaustion, she said softly. The ship connects to us in ways we don't fully understand. When it fires its weapons, it takes from us our strength, our will. If we keep fighting like this, it could kill us. Jacob shook his head, frustration in his voice. But what choice do we have? Without the eclipse, Earth is finished. The enemy fleet is coming, and nothing else can stop them. Claire stood near the window, arms crossed, her eyes sharp as she looked out at the stars. Maybe the question isn't whether we use the eclipse. Maybe it's how much of ourselves we are willing to give. Daniel sat quietly in the captain's chair, his face hard. He could feel the same emptiness inside, a heaviness that was more than fatigue, but he pushed it down. Earth needed him. The crew needed him. Orion's voice filled the bridge, steady and calm. The eclipse was built to be more than metal and machines. It was built to fight as one with its crew. That is, its strength and its price. The old crew gave everything, and because of them, the ship survived. Now it is your turn. Laura frowned. Are you saying we have to sacrifice ourselves for the ship to work? Yes, Orion replied without hesitation. The greater the battle, the greater the price. The coming armada will demand everything you have. The words fell heavy in the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Daniel rose to his feet. Then we'll give what we must. If Earth falls, there will be nothing left anyway. Better we burn with the eclipse than watch our world die. Claire's eyes softened as she looked at him. She had served under Daniel long enough to know the burden he carried. He would give his life without hesitation if it meant saving others. The question was whether she and the rest of the crew were ready to do the same. Jacob broke the silence, his voice firm. If this ship asks for everything, then I'll give it. Earth has no one else. Laura's voice was quieter, but steady. Then we stand together, no matter the cost. Daniel nodded. Then it's decided. We prepare for the armada. For the next days, the crew worked harder than ever before. Jacob pushed himself to repair damaged systems and bring hidden weapons. Online, Laura treated the crew and monitored their health, even as her own strength waned. Claire studied battle patterns, simulating attacks and counterattacks, readying the eclipse for what was coming. Daniel spent long hours with Orion, learning how to guide the ship, how to push it without breaking. The bond between them grew. The eclipse was no longer just a relic. It was alive with their voices, their effort, their will. But with each passing day, the drain became clearer. Their eyes grew tired, their bodies weaker. They were giving themselves to the ship, piece by piece. One night, as the others rested, Daniel stood alone on the bridge. The stars stretched before him, silent and endless. Orion spoke softly. You carry their hope well, Commander. But hope alone will not be enough. The enemy fleet is vast. Even with me, the odds are slim. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then we make them pay for every step. If this is humanity's last stand, it will not be forgotten. Orion's voice carried a strange warmth. That is what your people said 2 centuries ago. They gave everything. Now it is your turn. The alarm sounded the next morning. Enemy ships had entered the system. Not scouts this time, but warships and an entire wave moving toward Earth. The armada was here. Claire snapped to her station, her voice sharp. Multiple contacts, dozens of ships. They're heading straight for the planet. Jacob's hands flew across his console. Weapons ready, but Commander, this many ships will push the eclipse to its limits. Laura steadied herself, her voice calm. We'll hold as long as we can. We have no other choice. Daniel sat in the captain's chair, his eyes fierce. Then we fight. Orion, take us into the heart of their fleet. The eclipse surged forward, its engines burning like fire. The first wave of alien ships closed in, weapons flashing. The eclipse shuddered as beams struck its hull, but its shields held. Daniel raised his hand. Fire. The ship answered. Lances of light tore through the darkness, ripping apart the front line of the enemy fleet. Explosions filled the stars. Debris scattering like sparks. But the strain hit the crew immediately. Daniel felt it in his chest. Claire staggered against her console. Jacob's hands trembled, and Laura nearly fell before catching herself. Still, they fought. The Eclipse fired again and again, its weapons cutting through alien ships, but each blast took more from the crew. Sweat poured from their faces. Their breathing grew heavy, but they held on. The battle raged on for hours. The alien fleet pressed harder, wave after wave. Earth's smaller ships joined the fight, but they were torn apart quickly, leaving the Eclipse alone against the storm. At last, a massive shadow appeared on the scanners. The alien flagship had arrived, a vessel larger than anything Daniel had ever seen. Its weapons glowed with deadly light, and behind it came the rest of the armada. Claire's voice was faint but steady. "That's their leader. If we don't stop it, Earth is finished." Daniel's hands gripped the chair tightly. His body ached, his strength fading, but his voice was firm. "Then this is where we make our stand. Whatever it takes." The Eclipse turned to face the massive flagship. Its lights glowed brighter than ever, its weapons charged for one final clash. The price of salvation was about to be paid. The Eclipse faced the massive flagship in the dark sea of stars. The alien vessel was enormous, a mountain of steel and light, and behind it came the endless swarm of the armada. The crew of the Eclipse sat in silence for a moment, each of them knowing this would be the hardest fight of their lives. Daniel tightened his grip on the chair. His body felt heavy, as if every movement took twice the effort, but his eyes were sharp. "Target the flagship," he ordered. Claire's hands shook on her console, but she nodded. Weapons locked, firing solution ready. Jacob's voice was tight with strain. "Shields at 70%. If that ship focuses fire on us, we won't last long." Laura's gaze moved from one crewmate to another. She could see the exhaustion in their faces. They were running on nothing but willpower now. "Still," she whispered, almost like a prayer. "Hold together. Just hold together." The flagship opened fire. A storm of energy beams and missiles cut across the stars, slamming into the Eclipse. The ship shook, alarms blaring, sparks flying across the bridge. Jacob struggled to keep the shields up, his hands racing across the controls. "Shields down to 50%, he shouted. "We can't take many more hits like that." Daniel's voice cut through the noise. "Return fire." The Eclipse answered, its cannons lit the void, beams of pure energy slashing through the alien escort ships. One by one, the smaller vessels exploded, clearing a path to the flagship. But every shot came at a price. Daniel felt his chest burn. Claire gasped for breath, Jacob's vision blurred. And Laura nearly collapsed. Still, they fought. The alien flagship loomed closer, its weapons burning brighter. Claire's voice was raw, but steady. "Their main cannon is charging. If it hits us, it will cut straight through." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Then we hit them first." Orion's voice rose, calm but filled with urgency. "Commander, I can channel everything into one strike. But it will drain the ship hand, all of you. If we fail, there will be nothing left." The crew looked at Daniel, waiting for his answer. He stood slowly, his body trembling, but his voice was firm. "Do it. This is our chance. Earth depends on us." The Eclipse glowed with power, its hull alive with streams of light. Energy built in its core, brighter and brighter, until the whole ship seemed to burn like a star. The crew felt it inside them, the drain pulling at their strength, their very souls. But none of them stopped. The alien flagship fired first. A massive beam of crimson energy cut across the void, tearing through space as it raced toward the Eclipse. At the same moment, the Eclipse unleashed its strike. A lance of pure white light erupted from its heart, colliding with the enemy's weapon in the middle of the battlefield. The clash shook the stars. Explosions rippled out, waves of energy tearing through both fleets. Dozens of alien ships were torn apart instantly. The Eclipse screamed as its systems overloaded, its lights flickering, its hull shuddering as though it would break apart. Inside, the crew was thrown from their stations. Claire struggled to hold onto her console. Jacob fell to the floor but pulled himself back up. Laura cried out as the strain threatened to crush her. And Daniel forced himself to stand against the weight pressing down on him. The beams clashed for long seconds, neither side giving way. The flagship's power was immense. But the Eclipse burned with something more: the will of its crew, the will of humanity not to fall. Slowly, painfully, the enemy's beam began to falter. Daniel shouted, his voice breaking. "Push harder! All of you. Give it everything." The crew obeyed. They gave their strength, their will, their very breath to the ship. The Eclipse roared as its light grew brighter, surging forward with unstoppable force. At last, the enemy's weapon shattered, and the beam of the Eclipse tore through the flagship. The alien vessel erupted in a massive explosion, fire and debris scattering across the void. The shockwave rippled through the armada, throwing enemy ships into chaos. For the first time, the endless swarm faltered. Silence fell on the bridge. The crew lay weak and broken, their bodies drained, their breaths shallow. The ship was scarred, its systems failing, its lights dim. But the flagship was gone. Claire whispered, her voice trembling. "We did it." Jacob leaned against his console, too tired to smile. But there are still so many left. On the scanners, the armada remained vast, but the ships were no longer moving as one. Without the flagship, their formation had collapsed. Earth's surviving defenses began to strike back, emboldened by the Eclipse's victory. The tide of the battle had turned. Laura wiped the sweat from her face, her hands shaking. "We broke their leader. The rest can still be beaten." Daniel slumped back into the captain's chair, his body trembling, but his eyes filled with fire. Then, "We hold. As long as we breathe, we hold." The Eclipse drifted in the void, broken but unbowed, standing as the last wall between Earth and the end. The armada regrouped, preparing for another wave. The crew steadied themselves, ready to give whatever remained. They knew this was not over. Victory had come at a terrible cost. And the final price was yet to be paid. But for the first time, humanity had shown the galaxy that it would not fall quietly. Asterisk. The Eclipse floated in the dark sky above Earth, wounded but still alive. The ship's hull was scarred, its lights flickered weakly, and its systems struggled to stay online. Inside, the crew was exhausted, their bodies weak, but they refused to give in. The battle was not over, and they all knew it. Daniel sat in the captain's chair, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His eyes were fixed on the view ahead, where the alien armada was slowly regrouping. Even though the enemy flagship was destroyed, thousands of ships still filled the void. They were disorganized, but they were still dangerous. Claire leaned against her console, her hands shaking. "Shields are almost gone," she said softly. "Weapons are only at 30%. We can't fight them all." Jacob coughed, his voice rough. "But we can still stand. If we hold this line, Earth's defense fleet might push through." Laura looked at the others, her face pale but her eyes steady. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." Daniel nodded, forcing strength into his voice. "We don't have to fight them all. We just have to show them they can't win." The Eclipse turned slowly, its engines struggling but refusing to fail. Across the battlefield, Earth's remaining ships rallied behind it. Inspired by the Eclipse's strike against the flagship, they pushed forward, hitting the scattered enemy forces with everything they had. The aliens swarmed again, their weapons blazing, But their attacks no longer carried the same unity. They clashed with Earth's defenders, losing more ships as the Eclipse fired volley after volley, each shot tearing through the chaos. The battle stretched on, brutal and unrelenting. The Eclipse shook with every strike it took, its shields failing, its armor breaking. On the bridge, sparks flew, smoke filled the air, and the crew fought to stay conscious. Still, they held the line. Claire's voice was faint, but steady. Another wave down. Their numbers, they're falling. Jacob forced a tired smile. We're turning them back. They're losing control. Laura closed her eyes for a moment, whispering, "Hold together. Just a little longer." Then, it happened. The alien fleet, once an unstoppable wall, began to retreat. Ship by ship, formation by formation, they pulled back into the void. Their attacks slowed, their fire weakened, and finally they turned away from Earth. The battlefield fell. Quiet, broken only by the wreckage of burning ships drifting through the stars. The Eclipse floated among them, battered but still standing. On the bridge, silence settled over the crew. They could barely believe what they were seeing. After so many years of fear, after so many battles lost, the enemy was retreating. Claire's lips trembled as she spoke. "They're leaving." Jacob leaned against his console, his voice filled with disbelief. We did it. Earth is still here." Laura wiped her eyes, her tears mixing with the grime on her face. "We fought back. We didn't fall." Daniel sat quietly in his chair, staring out at the stars. His body was weak, but his heart felt stronger than ever. Slowly, he spoke, his voice low but firm. "This isn't just a victory for us. It's a message. Humanity is not broken. We will never be broken." The crew listened, too tired to speak, but they understood. The Eclipse was more than a ship. It was proof that even in the darkest times, humanity could rise again. Hours passed before Earth's fleet finally secured the skies. Rescue ships moved among the wreckage, gathering survivors, putting out fires, and carrying the wounded home. When they reached the Eclipse, they were stunned to see it still alive. The story of its battle spread quickly, carried across every ship and every survivor on Earth. People looked to the sky as the news arrived. The lost warship had returned, and with it, humanity's hope had been reborn, for the first time in years. The people of Earth believed they could survive. The crew of the Eclipse remained on the bridge, strained to move but unwilling to leave their posts. Each of them had given everything, yet they were proud. They had stood together, and they had won. Claire looked at Daniel and whispered, "What happens now?" Daniel leaned back, his eyes closing for a moment. "Now we rebuild. The enemy will come again, but when they do, we'll be ready." Laura smiled faintly, her voice soft. "Because Earth has the Eclipse," Jacob added, his words quiet but filled with pride, "and the crew that refused to fall." Outside the window, the stars shone brighter than before. The wreckage of the enemy fleet drifted silently, a reminder of the cost of freedom, but also a symbol of victory. Earth had been saved, and humanity had proven that it would not fade into the shadows of history. The Eclipse, scarred and weary, turned slowly toward home. Its return had changed everything. It was no longer just a lost ship, was Earth's salvation, and as long as it sailed the stars, humanity would never be alone. Asterisk.